For my side lines, I chose 11 and 12, and for my angle values, I chose 135 and 45. So both my triangles are 45, 45, 90 triangles. The vectors both create 45, 45, 90 triangles because the reference angles are both 45. So the triangle in the first quadrant, I assign my A to, so 11. Since they're 45, 45, 90 triangles, this value is also 11 because these side lines are equal. So the vector there is 11, 11. And the same thing goes for the other triangle, except this is 12, and it's a negative 12 because it's in the second quadrant, but this is 12 because it's going up. So that vector is negative 12, 12. So it's asking me to add these two vectors. So when you're adding vectors, you add the first. To add vectors, you add the first components together and you add the second components together. So 11 plus negative 12 is negative 1. And then 17 plus 12 is 23. Now this time it's asking me to subtract this vector from this vector. So the subtracting vectors is the same process, except you're subtracting. You subtract the first component and you subtract the second component. So negative 12 minus 11 is negative 23, and 12 minus 11 is 1. And C is asking us to multiply vectors. When you multiply vectors, you use the dot product. This is 11 right here. So when you do the dot product, you multiply the first component, so 11 times 12, and then you multiply the second quadrant, 11 times you multiply the first components of 11 and negative 12. You multiply those together, and you multiply the second component, 11 and 12, and then you add them. So 11 times negative 12 is negative 132, and 11 times 12 is 132, and then you add them and equal 0. So for part A and B, it's asking us to find the magnitude and direction of the new vectors created. The magnitude is just the hypotenuse of the triangle the vector creates. So it's a right triangle, so we can use Pythagorean theorem. So negative 1 squared plus 23 squared equals radical 530, which is the magnitude. And to get the direction of the angle, we have to use tangent. Tangent is used because we know both the legs, but not the hypotenuse at first. So we have to use inverse tangent because we have side lengths. So inverse tangent of 23 over negative 1 equals a negative 87.101. So a negative angle doesn't sound right. So you have to add a 180 to it. You add it because you want to make sure the angle's in the right quadrant where the vector is. So you do the same process for B, where for the magnitude and direction, you use the Pythagorean theorem, negative 23 squared plus 1 squared, which gets us radical 530. And you also use the inverse tangent because we know the side lines and it's no angles, and we know the legs. So it's inverse tangent 1 over negative 23 equals negative 0.04345. Add a 180 to make sure it's in the right quadrant, and we get 179.956.